Well, thank you, Ed. Thank you, Ed, for that. And thank you very much for coming out on such a sultry evening. Particularly delighted that there was only one idiot stupid enough to wear a jacket and tie. So I'm going to talk and try to keep it as short as possible because I really hope, well, let's be honest, it's really hot in here. And I'm very keen to hear what your questions are. Andrew is also going to be asking me some questions. Andrew and I are good friends who agree on absolutely nothing. So I'm really going to be looking forward to your questions. And in fact, what I thought I would do in the sort of not terribly prepared remarks is try to short-circuit Andrew by asking and answering 4 questions about the book. And these are actual questions that I've been asked, because I've been doing a fair bit of media. I get lots of people asking me questions on Twitter, when I always try to answer. Just people in conversations. And there were 4 questions that I thought kind of summed up the whole thing. So I thought, I'll ask them, I'll answer them, Andrew will have nothing valuable to contribute to the conversation. And then we can move right along. And the first one was, why is there no subtitle? Every book has a subtitle. This book has no subtitle. It's just called Stephen Harper. And there's a very particular reason to that. When I started writing Stephen Harper are colon books. They're either Stephen Harper, Savior of the Nation, or Stephen Harper, Tyrant. And I want it to be Stephen Harper, a biography. That is to say, I want to take a fairly full look at the life of one of the most important prime ministers in our nation's history. You can like Stephen Harper or you can hate Stephen Harper. And right now I would say the quotient is about hate versus like. But whether you like or hate him, you have to acknowledge that he has been a major prime minister. He's our 6th longest serving PM. He's been in power for a decade. He's changed the country, I believe, in certain fundamental ways. And the book talks about ways in which he has done things that I believe are in the nation's interest and things that he has done that I believe are not in the nation's interest. But what we can't deny is that we are a different country after 10 years because of him. And I believe many of the things that we have changed will not be easily changed back. And I'm going to cite just one incident. I talk in the book about 6 big things, and that Stephen Harper did. You can argue whether these are 6 good big things or 6 bad big things, or some good, some bad. The one that I think he gets the least credit for, and the one that I actually assign him the greatest credit for, is fixing federalism. And that's not something you're often going to hear with Stephen Harper. Because this is a prime minister who, as you know, will not meet with the premiers, doesn't do first ministers' conferences, is very passive on the file. I think that's a wonderful thing. I was born in 1955, and I think my first sort of sentient memory is of Quebec politicians complaining they were unhappy with the country. And we have lived for about 50 years with this great national headache of what to do about the Federation. How can we meet Quebec's demands? What are the limits to meeting Quebec's demands? Oh, wait a minute, this has now produced new demands from Western Canada. How can we meet those? Well, let's have another First Ministers' Conference on healthcare. We just had this great national migraine for decade after decade after decade, and it never went away until 2006. When Harper said, here's how we're going to do it. The federal government is going to operate exclusively in the spheres of its jurisdiction, as laid down by the Constitution, and the provinces are going to operate exclusively in the spheres of their jurisdiction. And we're going to adjust the fiscal formula so the provinces have enough money to deliver the services that they need, and have a nice day. It has produced 10 years of quiet. Now, there have been spats here and there, but essentially we have, for the first time in my life, had a decade in which the future of the country, whether it would survive and how it would survive, or what it would look like and what it should look like, has just gone away. We've had peace. And I think we will continue to have that peace because I don't think there's a lot of appetite for reinvigorating that old sense of nation building, which is really just nation contesting. So that was why I wanted to write a book about him, and why I wanted it to be a colon book that just said a biography. And then at one point last November, I talked to Doug and I said, you know, we're designing the cover, others were, not me. And I said, you know what, why don't we drop the biography? Why don't we just call it Stephen Harper? And Doug said, it's elegant, we'll do that. So that's why we have a book with no subtitle. Another thing that I get asked a lot, I always find that, though, really pretentious, isn't it? Politicians say, people ask me, you know, what do you mean? People just walk up to you on the street and say, Prime Minister, I have a question about healthcare for you. But anyway, the other question I get asked a great deal is, what did you learn? And I learned a lot, and I'm not going to tell you all of it, because then you wouldn't buy the book. But I can tell you some of the things, a few of the things, maybe just to whet your appetite, that surprised me in researching the book. One is, for example, is the huge influence of his father, Joe Harper. Of course, our parents influenced greatly, us all greatly, but few sons have been influenced as powerfully as Joe Harper influenced his three sons. Joe Harper didn't drink. Two of his sons are complete teetotalers, and Stephen Harper has about 3 drinks a year. And never really finishes them either. Joe Harper was an introvert. All 3 of his sons are introverts. Steve's actually the lively one of the 3. Joe Harper was an accountant. 2 of his sons are accountants. And Stephen Harper jokes that he wanted to be an accountant, but he didn't have the personality for it, so he became an economist instead. Here's an interesting thing. Joe Harper worked as an accountant in Imperial Oil in the 50s, got involved in computers, in very early stages, obviously, systems design. And he worked with Harvey Gelman, who, if you know anything about Canadian computing history, and I know nothing about Canadian computing history, but if you did, Harvey Gelman was one of the pioneers in Canadian computing. And so Harvey Gelman and Joe Harper worked together on this project to install one of the very first mainframes in Canada for Imperial Oil. And Harvey talked, they became friends, something that happened with very, very few people in Joe Harper's life. And who does that sound like? And Harvey Gelman's family came over in Europe, fleeing the Nazis in the 30s. And therefore they lived. Most of the rest of his family died in the Holocaust. So Harvey talked to Joe about the terrible price the Jews had paid during the Second World War, and the tremendous importance of Israel, of a place where Jews could find sanctuary, and of the tremendous importance that the rest of the world support and sustain and defend Israel, which was perpetually under threat. Joe became powerfully convinced by this and impressed upon his sons the tremendous importance of sustaining and supporting the state of Israel. And that became our foreign policy. That's the kind of influence that Joe Harper had on. Well, another thing, I had a question, and I just had a hunch that if I could answer this question, I could unlock a lot of the secrets to the book. Which, by the way, spends a little over half, actually, of its time looking at Stephen Harper before he became Prime Minister. I read a lot of biography, and I've always been fascinated by the parts of a person's life before that person becomes president or, famous actor or musician or whatever. So I wanted to find out a lot about Stephen Harper before, when he was Steve Harper, which was everybody called him. And I knew this. I knew it as a fact that he graduated top of his class from Ridgeview High School. He was a classic suburban boomer kid. He was going to be the first in his family to go to university, and went to University of Toronto with great expectations. Lasted 2 weeks and quit. Why did he quit? Figure out why Stephen Harper quit, and you're going to have, I thought, an answer to some of the questions surrounding him. Because he didn't just quit. And this is the point that a lot of people who've been looking at his life in the past haven't really dwelled on. He quit, went home, big scene at home. His father and parents are just appalled that their son would do such a thing. Son is adamant that he's not going back to that university. That's all there is to it. Joe calls his friend Gord Shaw, who works in the Imperial Office in Edmonton, says, I don't know what to do with my son. He just walked out of university. I can't even speak to him. Do you have anything out there? Gord says, yeah, we have an opening for a mailroom clerk. That Friday, Stephen Harper is on a plane for Edmonton. He works in that mailroom for 3 years. 3 years. We all drop out of school, well, we don't all drop out of school, but a lot of us drop out of school for a term, maybe a year, maybe we go off to Europe and backpack and think about some unrequited love affair. He quit for 3 years, the top of his class, pride of his parents, and he worked in a mailroom. And then she sort of got into office work for 3 years. They transferred eventually, the office itself closed and moved to Calgary, and that's where we got to Calgary. What on earth happened that Stephen Harper would walk out of university and not walk back into it for 3 years when he has that smart, that much potential? Well, I discovered he didn't just go to University of Toronto, he went to Trinity College. And Andrew will know that I have a theory about places like Trinity College, which is that they are the sort of breeding ground of what I call the Laurentian elite. And some of you may know this book that Darrell Berger and I wrote about the Laurentian elites and the Laurentian consensus. And in a word, we argue that for most of this country's history, we were governed, and well governed, by the way, as we point out, by the political, academic, journalistic, cultural elites in Toronto, Ottawa, and Vancouver, and Montreal, the Laurentian watershed. And that they governed by consensus, and they ran the place. And we believe, Darrell and I, that their power has been shaken and ultimately broken, and that part of what Stephen Harper has achieved is to create a new consensus that does not necessarily involve the Laurentian elites, and everyone knows this except the Laurentian elites. Well, where did the Laurentian elites send their sons and daughters? To Trinity College. We are the salt of the earth, so give ear to us. No idea shall ever come near to us. Orthodox, Catholic, crammed with divinity, damn that send us hurrah for old Trinity. I was class of 78. And as I wrote in the book, and actually it's a sufficiently important paragraph that they put it on the back, so it makes it easy. Whatever was going through his mind in the months leading up to his decision to quit, the fact remains that in his first encounter with the upper Canadian elite, the young men and women who would go on to run the businesses, lead the political parties, manage the bureaucracies, and shape the arts and academies of English Central Canada, Stephen Harper decided he wanted none of it or them. He could have tried to fit into this new world, which was closed but less impermeable than in the past. Instead, he fled from it. His decision to reject that world and his sense of exclusion from it would shape his life and his politics. It marked him. One other thing I'll talk about that I learned while I was working on the book. And I didn't know I had it until somebody pointed it out to me. I was finished the first draft, and I sent it to a few friends for their thoughts. And one of them said, "You're missing it, aren't you?" I said, "What?" It's in your own book. It's everywhere in the book, and you just don't see it. This is alarming. So I said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, this is a guy who fought with his high school teachers when he was at Richfield Collegiate. This is a guy who walked out of university when the profs told him that half of them would be gone by Christmas. This was a guy who worked for Jim Hawkes, an MP in Calgary, when he was still an undergraduate student at the University of Calgary, when he finally went back, who lasted 1 year under Jim Hawkes before he quit. This is a guy who Preston Manning took under his wing at the age of 28, promoted him to second in command of the new Reform Party, who had a brilliant future. And Stephen Harper once wrote a 20-page memo to Preston Manning saying, "You are doing absolutely everything wrong, and if you don't change your ways, you're never going to become Prime Minister."